Have you ever felt that tightness in your chest when life throws too much at you at once? That sinking feeling when nothing seems to go right, and every setback feels like the end of the world. We've all been there, stuck in traffic, drowning in deadlines, or lying awake at night replaying every mistake, wondering why everything feels so heavy. Desperation has a way of creeping in, making the smallest problems feel insurmountable. But what if I told you there's an ancient philosophy, tested by time and hardship, that can dissolve that desperation in an instant? Stoicism isn't just some dusty old school of thought, it's a toolkit for modern resilience, a way to reclaim control when life feels chaotic. And today, we're diving into 25 powerful Stoic shifts that act like mental reset buttons, cutting through desperation like a blade through fog. These aren't vague theories, they're immediate, practical mindset flips used by emperors, slaves, and everyone in between to face adversity with unshakable calm. Picture this: instead of reacting to chaos with panic, you meet it with clarity. Instead of feeling trapped by circumstances, you see them as opportunities to grow stronger. That's the power of Stoicism. It doesn't just help you survive life's storms, it teaches you to dance in the rain. Over the next 25 shifts, you'll discover how to reframe loss, silence self-doubt, and find unshakable confidence in your ability to handle anything. Some of these techniques take seconds to apply, yet their impact lasts a lifetime. Others will challenge you to rethink everything you thought you knew about control, failure, and what it means to be truly free. By the end, you'll have a new lens to view your struggles not as obstacles, but as the very things that forge your strength. So if you're ready to replace desperation with mastery, let's begin. The first shift is like flipping a mental switch. Stoicism teaches us to pour all our energy into what we can actually influence and let go of everything else. Picture Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher born a slave who faced hardships most of us can't even imagine. Yet he taught one of history's most freeing truths: some things are up to us and some things simply aren't. That's the dichotomy of control. Your thoughts, your actions, your choices, those belong to you. The weather, traffic, other people's opinions, completely outside your command. Desperation thrives when we waste effort trying to change the unchangeable. Think about it. How many times have you stressed over a delayed flight, a rude comment, or a chaotic news cycle? Stoicism asks a radical question: does fretting over these things actually improve them, or does it just drain you? Here's the shift: when you catch yourself spiraling about something uncontrollable, pause and ask, can I do anything about this right now? If the answer's no, you've just saved yourself a mountain of wasted emotion. One practical way to apply this is the circle of control exercise. Literally draw 2 circles inside the smaller one. List what's truly yours to command: your effort, your attitude, your responses. In the larger circle, note everything else: external events, past mistakes, even your own body's aging. The moment you see it visually, desperation loses its grip. Instead of screaming at the rain, you grab an umbrella. Instead of resenting a boss's unfair critique, you focus on refining your skills. This isn't passivity, it's precision. Stoics don't ignore problems, they attack them where it matters. Imagine a sailor obsessing over the wind instead of adjusting the sails. That's what we do when we fixate on the uncontrollable. But when you shift your focus to your own helm, your decisions, your perseverance, suddenly the storm feels manageable. This is how Epictetus could find freedom in chains, by realizing no one could control his mind but him. That's the ultimate antidote to desperation, knowing where your power truly lies. Imagine waking up each morning not just bracing for life's challenges, but genuinely welcoming them: every setback, every inconvenience, even every heartbreak. That's the radical shift Stoicism offers with Amor Fati, a Latin phrase meaning love of fate. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor who ruled Rome through war and plague, wrote in his private journal, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. At first glance, that might sound like empty optimism, but it's far deeper. Amor Fati isn't about pretending hardships don't hurt. It's about recognizing that resistance to reality is what multiplies our suffering. Think of it like quicks, and the more you thrash against it, the faster you sink. Desperation thrives when we wage war against circumstances we can't change. But when we stop shouting, "Why me?" and start asking, "What now?" something extraordinary happens. Obstacles transform into fuel. Consider Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps. He couldn't control the horrors around him, but he could choose his attitude toward them. In his darkest moments, he visualized a future where he'd use his suffering to help others. That's Amor Fati in action, not passive resignation, but active engagement with reality as it is, not as we wish it were. Here's the practical shift. Next time you face a cancelled plan, a financial hit, or even a personal betrayal, pause and say, "This is what's happening. How can I use it?" Maybe the job rejection frees you for a better opportunity. Maybe the illness teaches you patience. The Stoics called this the art of turning obstacles upside down, like a judo master using an opponent's momentum to their advantage. Marcus Aurelius faced rebellions, betrayals, and the weight of an empire, yet he wrote, "Accept whatever comes to you woven in the pattern of your destiny." That's the key, trusting that every thread, even the frayed and broken ones, contributes to the larger tapestry of your growth. Nietzsche, who admired Stoicism, put it bluntly, "My formula for greatness is Amor Fati, not merely to endure necessity, but to love it." Try this exercise today. Pick one annoyance you'd normally complain about: a long line, a noisy neighbor, a sore muscle, and reframe it as a chance to practice patience, focus, or gratitude. That's how desperation melts into purpose. The rain isn't ruining your picnic, it's teaching you adaptability. The critic isn't tearing you down, they're sharpening your resilience. When you stop seeing life as something that happens to you and start seeing it as something that happens for you, you unlock a profound truth: fate isn't your enemy. It's your training ground. History remembers those who didn't just endure obstacles but weaponized them. Take Thomas Edison. When his lab burned down, destroying years of work, he didn't collapse in despair. He famously said, "Thank goodness all our mistakes were burned up, now we can start fresh." That's the Stoic mindset in action, seeing disaster not as a dead end, but as raw material for reinvention. The ancient Stoics called this the art of the flip, taking what appears to be a setback and discovering the hidden advantage within it. Seneca, who lost his health, his wealth, and eventually his life to Emperor Nero's tyranny, wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." He wasn't just offering comfort, he was revealing a psychological alchemy that turns leaden struggles into golden growth. Consider the story of James Stockdale, the naval officer shot down over Vietnam and held as a prisoner of war for 7 years. Beaten, starved, and kept in solitary confinement, he later credited Stoicism for his survival. While others perished from despair, Stockdale saw his captivity as a grueling classroom. Every interrogation became a test of his principles. Every empty hour was space to refine his thoughts. He emerged not broken, but hardened like steel, proof that the most crushing pressures can forge unshakable resilience. The shift here is subtle but transformative. It's not about denying pain, but recognizing that pain often carves out the space where strength can grow. Even in everyday life, this principle applies. A musician with a broken wrist learns composition while healing. A rejected writer uses criticism to refine their voice. The common thread: they stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What can this make possible?" Marcus Aurelius scribbled reminders to himself like, "The obstacle becomes the way," not as platitudes but as battle cries. When barbarians threatened Rome, he didn't wish for peace, he used the chaos to drill his discipline sharper. When his children died young, he funneled grief into deeper compassion for others suffering. Here's how to practice this shift today. Identify one current struggle and list 3 ways it might secretly serve you. Maybe that frustrating job teaches patience. Maybe a betrayal reveals who truly matters, like a blacksmith viewing every strike of the hammer as shaping rather than shattering. You'll find that desperation fades when obstacles become tools. The very things meant to break you become the whetstone that sharpens you. What if the key to crushing desperation was to willingly face your worst fears, not in reality but in your imagination? This sounds counterintuitive, even masochistic, yet the Stoics practiced it religiously. They called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Picture Seneca sitting in his opulent Roman villa, deliberately visualizing the loss of his wealth, his status, even his family. Why? Because he understood a profound psychological truth. Fear stems from the unknown, from the shock of the unexpected. But when you've already walked through the fire in your mind, real flames lose their power to terrify. Take the modern example of a CEO preparing for a high-stakes board meeting. Most people would obsess over perfecting their presentation, clinging to the hope everything goes smoothly. The Stoic approach: spend 10 minutes visualizing the projector failing, the toughest executive grilling them with impossible questions, even complete silence when they finish speaking. This isn't pessimism, it's emotional inoculation. By mentally rehearsing disasters, you strip them of their ability to ambush you. Navy SEAL use a similar tactic called stress inoculation training, where they simulate battlefield horrors to condition their minds to remain calm amid chaos. Here's the twist: when you actually play out these scenarios, you often realize they're survivable. The Stoics believed most suffering comes not from events themselves, but from our belief about those events. Imagine losing your job. The initial panic might feel overwhelming until you mentally walk through updating your resume, reaching out to your network, or even embracing the chance to pivot careers. Suddenly, the monster under the bed looks like a manageable challenge. The practice works because it exposes the gap between our irrational dread and reality's actual blows. Ancient Stoics would visualize exile, illness, or betrayal, then ask themselves, could I still act with integrity if this happened? The answer was almost always yes. That realization builds an unshakable confidence, not that bad things won't happen, but that you'll handle them when they do. Try this tonight. Instead of worrying about tomorrow's uncertainties, pick one fear and mentally live through it. Visualize the details, the emotions, the practical steps you'd take, even the unexpected opportunities that might arise from it. You'll find what the Stoics knew: desperation thrives in the dark corners of the unexamined mind. Shine a light there, and you reclaim power over the shadows. There's a reason the Stoics kept skulls on their desks, not as morbid decorations, but as visceral reminders of life's most liberating truth: you won't be here forever. Memento Mori, Latin for remember you must die, might sound dark at first glance, but it's one of the most life-affirming practices in Stoicism. Think of it as a mental scalpel that cuts through petty anxieties and forces you to confront what truly matters. When Steve Jobs stood before Stanford graduates in 2005, he didn't give them generic advice about chasing dreams. He said, "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life." That's the power of this shift. Mortality isn't just an endpoint, it's a lens that clarifies every decision. Consider how differently you'd approach today if you knew it were your last. Would you waste hours scrolling through social media, obsess over a coworker's snide remark, or would you call someone you love, start that project you've been delaying, or finally forgive that grudge you've carried like a stone in your pocket? The Stoics weren't fixated on death to depress themselves, they used it to electrify their lives with urgency and purpose. Seneca wrote letters urging his friends to live as if each evening they'd have to justify their day to a stern judge. Not a judge of their failures, but of their unrealized potential. history's most impactful figures from samurai warriors to Renaissance artists practiced versions of Memento Mori. The Japanese had ikigo iki, meaning one time, one meeting, treating every interaction as irreplaceable. The Medici family commissioned paintings of skeletons whispering in lovers' ears. Even modern psychologists validate this. Studies show that when people contemplate their mortality, they're more likely to prioritize deep relationships over shallow pleasures and legacy over momentary comfort. Here's how to apply this shift without macabre obsession. Every morning, take 30 seconds to acknowledge life's brevity. Then ask, if today were my last, would I be proud of how I spend it? Not to incite panic, but to dissolve desperation's grip on trivialities. That argument with your partner, seen through Memento Mori, it's a waste of precious time. That creative project you've postponed, suddenly there's no someday left to hide behind. The irony is that confronting death doesn't diminish life, it intensifies it. Like an hourglass where the sand reminds you to value each grain, Memento Mori turns desperation into decisive action. The deadline that once stressed you becomes a gift, proof you're still in the game. The rejection letter stings less when you realize how few chances you'll even get to fail. Even physical pain takes on new meaning, proof you're alive to feel it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." That's the ultimate shift. When you stop fearing the end, you start honoring the present. Your mortality isn't a threat, it's the compass that points you toward what's truly worth your desperation. And paradoxically, by embracing the fact that nothing lasts, you begin living like everything does. Right now, whatever problem feels like it's crushing you, that argument, that debt, that failure, imagine viewing it from 10,000 feet in the air. Now picture zooming out further, seeing your city as a tiny grid, your country as a speck on the globe, the Earth itself as a pale blue dot floating in the vastness of space. That's the view from above, Marcus Aurelius' favorite mental exercise for dissolving desperation. The Roman emperor would spend nights in military camps writing in his journal, reminding himself, "You can rid yourself of many useless things among those that disturb you, for they lie entirely in your imagination." You will then at once gain space by comprehending the whole universe in your mind. This isn't about minimizing real pain, it's about correcting our skewed sense of scale. Think of how a mountain looks up close versus from an airplane window. The same boulders that seem impassable on the ground become mere wrinkles on the Earth's skin when seen from altitude. Our brains are wired to magnify immediate threats, an evolutionary holdover from when survival depended on spotting every rustle in the grass. But today, that same mechanism turns minor setbacks into existential crises. A leaked email thread feels like career Armageddon. A single rejection twists into proof we're unlovable. Here's where the cosmic perspective helps. When physicist Carl Sagan showed Earth as a single pixel in the famous pale blue dot photo, he noted how all human conflict, all our triumphs and sorrows occurred on that microscopic speck. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, writing, "Think of the substance of the whole of which you bear the smallest share, and of the whole time of which a brief hour has been allotted to you." He wasn't being dismissive, he was grounding himself in reality. Try this next time anxiety strikes. Close your eyes and visualize floating upward. See your neighborhood shrink to the size of a postage stamp, then your continent to the size of a leaf. Keep zooming out until you're imagining the solar system's silent dance planets moving in perfect, indifferent orbits for billions of years before you existed, and will continue long after. Your crisis, no matter how real, occupies no more space in this grand scheme than a single frame in an endless film. The magic happens when you return from this mental journey. That work conflict hasn't vanished, but it's no longer a monster, just a momentary ripple. The Stoics called this taking the cosmic view, and modern psychology confirms its power. Astronauts who see Earth from space often report the overview effect, a profound shift in priorities, realizing national borders and personal grudges are meaningless against the backdrop of our shared fragile planet. Marcus didn't have space travel, but he grasped the principle. When we stop conflating our subjective experience with objective reality, we regain agency. Your boss's harsh email isn't a universe-ending event. It's one human's fleeting mood in an office on a spinning rock, the debt weighing on you, a temporary arrangement of numbers that won't matter in a century. This perspective doesn't erase responsibility, it clarifies what's truly worth your emotional investment. Practical application. Keep a cosmic reminder handy, a Hubble telescope image on your phone, a small globe on your desk. When overwhelmed, ask, will this matter in 5 years, in the history of our species, in the lifespan of a star? The answer isn't nihilism, it's liberation. As Marcus wrote, how quickly all things vanish, in the universe the bodies themselves, but in time even the memory of them. What remains is your choice to either drown in what's fleeting or anchor yourself in what endures, your character, your capacity for growth, your microscopic but irreplaceable place in the grand story. That's how a Roman emperor turned existential dread into unshakable poise, by remembering his problems were both profoundly human and cosmically small. Imagine holding a mirror to your thoughts, not to admire your reflection, but to see clearly every crack, every shadow, every hidden corner of your mind. That's the power Stoic journaling wields. Marcus Aurelius' Meditations wasn't written for publication. It was his private notebook, filled with raw self-dialogue as he confronted grief, anger, and the weight of empire. You have power over your mind, not outside events, he scribbled one night, not as an inspirational quote, but as a stern reminder to himself. This practice wasn't unique to him. Seneca's letters reveal he journaled daily to argue down his anxieties, and Epictetus taught his students to end each day by auditing their actions like a philosopher balancing ledgers. Here's why this works. Desperation thrives in the chaos of unexamined thoughts. When emotions swirl unchecked, they distort reality. A missed promotion becomes proof you're a failure. A friend's busyness morphs into abandonment. Journaling acts like a centrifuge, separating fact from fiction. The Stoic method isn't about venting emotions onto paper, it's about interrogating them. Picture a courtroom where your fears are the defendant, and your pen is both prosecutor and judge. Start with Seneca's 3-question template he used each evening. What harm did I avoid today? What good did I do? What progress did I make? Notice the precision. These aren't vague reflections. They force you to locate tangible evidence of growth, even on days that feel like backslides. When Marcus wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one," he wasn't theorizing, he was correcting his own procrastination in real time. Modern research backs this. Studies show expressive writing reduces cortisol levels and improves problem-solving clarity. But the Stoic twist is crucial. They didn't just spill emotions onto parchment, they distilled them into actionable wisdom. Try this tonight. Divide your page into 2 columns. On the left, write the event that upset you. My colleague took credit for my idea. On the right, dissect it like a Stoic. What part of this was truly under my control? Did I communicate my contributions clearly? Is this person's opinion essential to my worth? The magic happens in the gap between reaction and response. When Marcus raged about betrayal, his journal didn't amplify the anger. It asked, what if this happened for my training? That slight pause, the space between pen strokes, is where desperation loses its grip. Your journal becomes a battleground where irrational fears meet relentless reason. Epictetus took it further with his discipline of assent, training himself to withhold judgment until he'd examined impressions logically. Your boss's frown might seem like disapproval, but is it actually about you? Maybe they're nursing a migraine. Journaling trains you to suspend automatic reactions and ask, what's the evidence? For a modern twist, adapt Marcus' habit of writing to himself in second person. Instead of "I'm overwhelmed," try "You're facing a challenge, but you've handled worse." This linguistic shift creates psychological distance, letting you coach yourself like a wise mentor rather than a panicked participant. The beauty of Stoic journaling. It transforms internal chaos into ordered steps forward. Those midnight spirals about unpaid bills become a bullet-pointed action plan. The heartache after a breakup morphs into clarity about what you truly value in relationships. Even failure gets reframed, Seneca wrote. Sometimes even to live is an act of courage. On days when merely showing up felt like victory, your journal isn't for posterity, it's for brutal, loving honesty. No one needs to see you wrestle with pettiness or fear, that's the point. Like a philosopher's version of a sketchbook, it's where rough drafts of your better self take shape. So tonight, before sleep claims you, steal 5 minutes with a notebook. Ask not just what happened, but what it can teach you. As the ink dries, you'll find what the emperors discovered. Clarity doesn't come from avoiding storms, but from learning to navigate by their winds. We all carry invisible weights, not the burdens actually placed on our shoulders today, but the phantom loads of what might happen tomorrow. The Stoics uncovered a startling truth. Most of our suffering isn't happening in reality. It's manufactured in the theater of our minds. Seneca put it bluntly, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Think about that for a second. The anxiety before a difficult conversation is usually worse than the conversation itself. The dread of a medical test outlasts the momentary discomfort of the procedure. Even heartbreak, while undeniably painful, is often compounded by our mental replays of memories that no longer exist and futures that never will. Consider the modern phenomenon of doom-scrolling, refreshing news feeds, bracing for catastrophe, as if emotional preparation could soften a blow that hasn't landed. Neuroscientists confirm this paradox. Our brain's pain circuits light up similarly whether we're experiencing actual harm or merely anticipating it. The Stoics called this propatheiae, pre-emotional reactions, where we feel distress about potential events as though they've already occurred. It's like paying interest on a debt you might never owe. Here's the shift. When you notice yourself spiraling into imagined suffering, pause and conduct a simple reality check. Ask, is this pain happening right now, or is my mind time traveling? The crushing loneliness you fear in old age, not here today. The financial ruin you envision if your startup fails. Still hypothetical. This isn't about denying real challenges, it's about refusing to pay the emotional tax on disasters that may never arrive. Epictetus trained his students to distinguish between actual events and our narratives about them. He'd say, it's not things that disturb us, but our interpretations of things. Picture someone terrified of flying. The plane's turbulence isn't the true source of their panic, it's their mental movie of the plane crashing. The actual present moment, just harmless clouds and a beverage cart rattling down the aisle. Modern psychology validates this with decatastrophizing techniques. Clients are guided to play out their worst-case scenarios logically. If I get fired, then what? I'd update my resume. Then what? I'd tap my network. Suddenly, the monster under the bed shrinks to a manageable series of steps. The Stoics took this further with premeditatio malorum, deliberately imagining losses to realize they're survivable. When Seneca envisioned exile, he concluded he'd still have the stars to gaze at and thoughts to think. When he pictured poverty, he remembered hunger could be satisfied with simple bread. Try this today. The next time your heart races over a future possibility, ground yourself in sensory reality. Name 5 things you see, 4 you can touch, 3 you hear. This isn't avoidance, it's recalibrating to what's truly present. Most desperation lies in the gap between what is and what if. Close that gap, and you reclaim vast reserves of energy once wasted on phantom pain. The irony, often the feared event never comes. Mark Twain famously said, "I've lived through terrible things in my life, some of which actually happened." By deleting imagined suffering, you're not being naive about life's hardships. You're choosing to meet real challenges with undiluted strength when they arise, not spread thin by battles fought in advance against enemies that never showed up. Seneca once wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body," a truth he lived firsthand. Exiled to Corsica under Emperor Claudius, stripped of wealth and status, he didn't crumble. Instead, he treated exile as a laboratory, studying how little a man truly needs to thrive. His letters reveal a radical perspective shift. Hardships weren't punishments, but curriculum. Imagine a boxer viewing each bruise not as proof of failure, but as the forging of unbreakable bones. That's the Stoic reframe. Every setback is a rep in the gym of character. Take Seneca's analogy of the olive press. The greater the pressure, the more oil flows out. He observed how farmers deliberately stressed vines to produce sweeter grapes, how blacksmiths hammered red-hot metal to strengthen it. Nature itself teaches that resistance isn't opposition, it's the mechanism of growth. Modern science confirms this. Muscles tear to rebuild stronger. Vaccines introduce weakened viruses to build immunity. The principle applies psychologically too. Studies on post-traumatic growth show that survivors of adversity often develop deeper empathy, clearer priorities, and resilience that can't be bought or faked. Here's the practical pivot. When facing hardship, ask Seneca's two questions. What is this here to teach me? And how could this prepare me for something greater? A startup founder whose product flopped might realize it taught them market gaps they'd missed. A heartbroken artist might channel pain into work that resonates with millions. Even physical pain carries lessons. Migraine sufferers often develop extraordinary focus during pain-free windows. Seneca took this further with his premeditation of adversity exercise. Before sleep, he'd visualize losing everything, not to dwell in misery, but to prove to himself he'd still retain his core strength. Like a fire drill preparing you to act calmly in real flames, this mental rehearsal dissolves fear of the unknown. When his prediction came true, Nero ordered him to commit suicide. Seneca met the end with eerie calm, dictating wisdom to scribes as his lifeblood drained away. His final lesson: the mind trained in hardship becomes unshakable, not because suffering disappears, but because it can no longer dictate terms. Apply this today. Identify one current struggle and list 3 skills it's forcing you to develop: patience, creativity, or detachment from others' opinions. Suddenly, the obstacle becomes the teacher, and desperation transforms into focus. As Seneca wrote to his grieving friend Lucilius, "No tree becomes rooted and sturdy unless many winds assail it." The winds aren't your enemies, they're the very forces that show you how deep your roots can go. Your comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing grows there. That's the paradox the Stoics uncovered 2,000 years ago. The path to lasting resilience isn't paved with ease, but with intentional, voluntary discomfort. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus, insisted his students practice barefoot walking, hard beds, and simple meals, not because life required deprivation, but because they knew comfort breeds fragility. Picture an athlete who only trains in perfect conditions. The first gust of wind or drop of rain would undo them. That's what happens when we let modern conveniences atrophy our tolerance for hardship. Desperation rushes into that gap the moment air conditioning fails, Wi-Fi drops, or plans go awry. We crumble. Here's the Stoic antidote: deliberately seek manageable discomfort to inoculate against life's inevitable hardships. It's not about masochism, it's about controlled exposure. Think of it like emotional weightlifting. You wouldn't attempt a 300-pound deadlift without training first. Yet we expect to handle real crises without ever practicing discomfort. The ancient Spartans understood this instinctively. Their boys bathed in icy rivers not to prove toughness, but to learn that temporary cold wouldn't kill them. Modern science confirms the wisdom. Studies on cold showers show they increase dopamine by 250% while reducing stress hormones. It's not the cold that transforms you, it's the daily decision to override your instinct for ease. Start small, take the stairs instead of the elevator, leave your phone behind on a walk, sit with boredom instead of reaching for distractions. These micro-discomforts rebuild what comfort has eroded, the knowledge that you can endure more than you think. When Seneca practiced poverty, wearing threadbare clothes and eating stale bread, he wasn't punishing himself. He was proving that his happiness didn't hinge on external conditions. That's the psychological shift. When you voluntarily face minor hardships, major ones lose their power to destabilize you. The magic happens in the moment of choice. Standing under a cold shower, everything in you screams to turn it warm. But when you stay, you're not just building cold tolerance, you're training the same neural pathways needed to face a layoff with clarity or a breakup without collapse. Navy SEAL use a similar principle in 40% rule, training when your mind says you're done. You've actually only tapped 40% of your capacity. Voluntary discomfort stretches that limit. Try this for the next week. Replace one comfort with its uncomfortable counterpart. Drink black coffee instead of sweetened. Take a freezing 1-minute shower blast at the end of your routine. Walk without headphones. Notice how quickly your brain protests, then watch as those protests lose their grip. Like a muscle strengthening under resistance, your resilience grows precisely where you challenge it. The Stoics didn't fear hardship, they courted it in measured doses. So when life served its inevitable hardships, they'd already done the reps. That's how voluntary discomfort becomes freedom, not from pain, but from the fear of pain. And in that space, desperation finds no foothold. A ship sinks in a storm. Is it good or bad? To the merchant who loses his cargo, it's a catastrophe. To the pirate waiting to plunder that same ship, it's a windfall. The event itself hasn't changed, only the judgments layered onto it. This is Epictetus' radical proposition. Nothing in life is inherently good or bad until we label it so. Your desperation isn't caused by circumstances, it's manufactured by the meanings you assign them. The ancient Stoic, born into slavery and crippled by a cruel master, had every reason to see life as unfair. Yet he taught that freedom comes not from controlling what happens, but from mastering how we interpret what happens. Take two people stuck in the same traffic jam. One white-knuckles the wheel, muttering about wasted time, his blood pressure rising with each minute. The other uses the pause to listen to an audiobook, noticing how sunlight filters through autumn leaves. Same gridlock, wildly different experiences. The Stoics called this the discipline of ascent, the moment between an event and your reaction where true power lies. Modern psychology confirms this. Cognitive behavioral therapy stems directly from Stoic principles, showing how altering thought patterns can transform emotional responses. Epictetus used stark examples to drive this home. Someone insults you, that's just sound waves hitting your eardrum until you decide it diminishes your worth. Lose your job, the event itself is neutral. Your interpretation determines whether it's a death sentence or a chance to pivot. Even something as universally dreaded as death isn't bad in Stoic logic. It's a natural process every living thing shares. The judgment, death is terrible, creates the suffering, not death itself. Here's how to apply this shift next time you're upset. Separate the raw facts from your story about them. Write down the objective event. My partner forgot our anniversary. Then list possible interpretations. Maybe they're careless, or maybe they're overwhelmed caring for a sick parent. Maybe it's a sign of trouble or an opportunity to communicate needs more clearly. The facts don't change, but your emotional response becomes a choice rather than a reflex. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, reminding himself, choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. When barbarians threatened Rome, he didn't waste energy cursing them. He focused on what their invasion could reveal about Roman resilience. Modern leaders use similar reframing. When Starbucks lost millions in the 2008 recession, Howard Schultz didn't panic. he saw a chance to retrain baristas and revamp stores, emerging stronger. The deepest freedom comes when you realize external events don't hold power over you, only your assessments do. A cancelled flight becomes unexpected downtime to read. A failed experiment reveals what doesn't work. Even grief, when stripped of "this shouldn't have happened," transforms into pure love with nowhere else to go. Epictetus wasn't suggesting we become emotionless robots. He was offering a lever to lift despair's weight. Judge less, observe more. The rain isn't ruining your picnic, it's watering the earth. The rejection letter isn't proof you're inadequate, it's redirection toward where your gifts are truly needed. Try this tonight. Recall one recent bad event and brainstorm 3 alternative interpretations, one neutral, one even beneficial. You'll discover what ancient philosophers and modern scientists agree on. Your mind is the artist, and every circumstance is just raw clay. Shape it with wisdom, and desperation loses its grip. Picture standing at the edge of the ocean at night, watching waves crash against the shore under a sky dense with stars. For a moment, you feel small, insignificant even. But then comes a second realization. That same salt water touching your feet connects you to every coastline on Earth, and those distant stars share atoms forged in the same cosmic fires as your bones. This is sympatheia, Marcus Aurelius' profound Stoic concept that everything in the universe is woven together in an intricate web of cause and effect. Far from some abstract philosophy, this shift has immediate practical power. When you grasp how deeply interconnected all things are, loneliness and isolation melt away like mist in morning sunlight. The emperor wrote in his private journal, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee." He wasn't just waxing poetic, he was grounding himself during plagues and wars by remembering he wasn't a solitary actor, but one thread in a vast tapestry. Modern science confirms this intuition in startling ways. Biologists now know the human body contains more bacterial cells than human ones. You're quite literally a walking ecosystem. The oxygen in your lungs was exhaled by trees halfway across the planet. Even your smartphone exists because of rare minerals mined in Congo, assembled in Vietnam, designed by teams spanning continents. Isolation is an illusion the mind constructs, but sympatheia shatters it. Consider how this applies to emotional struggles, that anxiety keeping you awake. The same neural pathways fire in brains across cultures and eras. The grief you think no one understands, scroll through centuries of literature, Shakespeare's sonnets, Sappho's fragments, the blues songs of the Mississippi Delta, and you'll find identical heartache given voice. Marcus Aurelius drew strength from this, writing, "When you're reluctant to get up at dawn, remember, others are rising too, the baker, the farmer, the traveler." Your challenges aren't proof life singled you out, they're the shared curriculum of being human. The practice gets even more potent when applied to adversaries. Ever noticed how anger at someone often stems from feeling they've disrupted your isolated world? Sympatheia reframes this. The coworker who undermines you is acting from their own wounds, shaped by parents you'll never meet, influenced by insecurities as real to them as yours are to you. This doesn't excuse harm, but it dissolves the us versus them narrative that turns conflicts into existential battles. The Stoics visualized this with a view from above, imagining cities as ant colonies, wars as brief squabbles in geological time. From that vantage point, petty grudges seem as absurd as two waves fighting over which belongs more to the ocean. Here's how to activate sympatheia today. Next time you feel alone in your suffering, research historical figures who have faced similar trials. Read Anne Frank's diary not just as tragedy, but as proof that hope persists in conditions far worse than yours. Walk through a busy street and remember, behind each face is a nervous system processing its own version of joy and pain, just like yours. Even stars exploding light years away contribute atoms to your bloodstream. When you internalize this, desperation transforms into something unexpected, awe. You're not a lonely island, you're the ocean itself, vast and connected to all shores. Marcus Aurelius' final twist: this interconnectedness isn't passive, it's a call to action. What doesn't benefit the hive doesn't benefit the bee, cuts both ways. Your courage to face depression today makes it easier for the next person to do the same. Your choice to act with integrity sends ripples through the social fabric. This is why Stoicism was never a solitary practice. It was always about showing up as your best self in the grand, messy, beautiful web of existence. The universe may be indifferent to individuals, but through sympatheia you become its conscious, caring edge. There's a hunger built into modern life, a constant whisper that happiness lies just beyond the next purchase, promotion, or milestone. But the Stoics uncovered a counterintuitive truth 2,000 years ago. Desperation isn't caused by lacking what you want, it's caused by wanting the wrong things. Epictetus, who knew true poverty as a slave, put it bluntly: wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. This is the discipline of desire, not suppressing your longings, but refining them to align with what's truly within your control. Picture two travelers, one obsessively checking the weather app, furious at every raindrop, while the other packed an umbrella and now enjoys the rhythm of rain on leaves. Both face the same storm, but only one is free because only one desired wisely. Modern psychology reveals our brains are wired for hedonic adaptation. We chase a raise, a relationship, a new car, only to return to our baseline happiness levels shortly after achieving them. The Stoics anticipated this with startling precision. Seneca observed how men would cross oceans for wealth, only to find themselves poorer in the midst of their gold. Why? Because they'd mistaken externals, money, status, possessions for true nourishment. The shift happens when you realize desire isn't the problem, its misdirection is. A plant doesn't crave sunlight because it's greedy, it's built to thrive on it. Human flourishing works the same way. Here's the practical realignment. Audit your desires by asking, is this rooted in nature or nurture? Hunger is natural, craving a specific gourmet meal is conditioned. Connection is natural, needing validation on social media is manufactured. The Stoics didn't advocate asceticism, they practiced selective wanting. Marcus Aurelius, ruling the wealthiest empire on earth, slept on a military cot and ate simple foods not to punish himself, but to prove that his peace didn't hinge on silk sheets. Contrast this with today's influencer culture, where self-worth gets tied to follower counts, a modern cage built from borrowed desires. Consider how this applies to dating. Desperation often creeps in when someone treats a relationship like a missing puzzle piece. If I just find the right person, I'll be whole. Stoicism flips this: cultivate wholeness first, then partnership becomes a choice, not a lifeline. The same principle reshapes career ambitions. Wanting to master your craft is natural. Tying your identity to a job title is a recipe for existential panic when layoffs come. Even fitness goals transform. Instead of chasing six-pack abs to impress strangers, you move your body because it's what bodies are meant to do, the ultimate test. Imagine losing the thing you desire most. If the thought triggers panic, your happiness is likely anchored to an external, and that's where suffering breeds. Epictetus advised his students to handle their finest china as if it were already broken, not to kill joy but to savor it without clinging. Try this today. Pick one thing you're chasing: a promotion, a romantic gesture from your partner, even a sunny weekend, and ask, could I still find meaning without this? If the answer's yes, you've just immunized yourself against a future desperation attack. If it's no, that's your work zone, detaching your worth from outcomes you can't fully control. The irony: when you align desires with what's truly yours, your integrity, your effort, your presence, externals often arrive anyway, but now they're seasoning rather than the main course. Like a gardener who stops obsessing over fruit and tends the roots instead, you'll find that what grows is sweeter, sturdier, and impossible to lose. That's the secret Epictetus whispered from his slaves' quarters. Want what you already have, and suddenly you hold everything. Imagine stepping onto a basketball court with one obsession, the final scoreboard. Every missed shot feels like a personal failure, every turnover a catastrophe. Now picture a different approach focusing solely on your form, your footwork, your awareness of teammates. The irony, by releasing your grip on the outcome, your performance actually improves. This is the heart of the Stoic discipline of action, detaching your sense of worth from results and anchoring it instead in the integrity of your effort. Seneca captured this when he wrote, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage," recognizing that showing up with intention matters more than any external measure of success. Performance desperation thrives when we conflate two distinct things, our control over actions and our control over outcomes. Think of a farmer planting seeds. He can till the soil, water diligently, and select quality seeds, but he can't command rain or sunshine. The Stoics drew a clear line between what's up to us, our choices, our efforts, and what's not, how others respond, whether luck intervenes. Modern psychology echoes this in locus of control theory. People who tie self-worth to internal effort rather than external validation report higher resilience and lower anxiety. History's greatest achievers often embodied this shift. Marie Curie didn't pursue radioactivity research for Nobel Prizes. She was driven by pure scientific curiosity. Her notebooks literally glow with radiation to this day, a testament to her total immersion in the work itself. Contrast this with the modern epidemic of hustle porn, where people grind not for love of craft, but for likes, promotions, or some future moment when they'll finally be happy. The Stoic alternative: measure your days not by harvests, but by how faithfully you tended the field. Practical application starts with reframing goals. Instead of "I must get a first date kiss," try "I'll be fully present and authentic." Rather than "I need to close this deal," focus on "I'll clearly communicate the value." This isn't about lowering standards, it's about redirecting energy to where you actually have agency. Epictetus, who watched gladiators battle in Rome's arenas, noted how the skilled fighter concentrated on technique, not the crowd's roar. When the sword struck true, it wasn't because he willed victory, it was because he'd mastered what was his to control. The magic reveals itself in the pressure cooker moments. A musician plagued by stage fright stops worrying about standing ovations and starts listening deeply to the interplay of instruments. A writer paralyzed by perfectionism shifts from "will this go viral?" to "does this sentence feel honest?" Even parenting transforms. You can't guarantee your child's happiness, but you can model emotional resilience through your own actions. Marcus Aurelius left himself notes like, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." That's the discipline of action in its purest form, replacing "will I succeed?" with "am I acting with integrity right now?" When you make that shift, desperation doesn't just fade, it's replaced by something far more powerful, the quiet certainty that no outcome can erase the worth of your striving. The irony: that's often when the outcomes start surprising you. Your mind is like a courtroom where thoughts stand trial before becoming beliefs, but most people skip the trial entirely. The Stoics called this the discipline of assent, and it's one of the most potent weapons against desperation. Picture this: your boss sends a terse email, and instantly your heart races as your mind spins a story about impending doom. But here's the catch: that email is just black text on a screen. The panic, that's your assent, your unconscious stamp of approval on the idea that this means disaster. Epictetus, the philosopher who transformed his enslavement into a masterclass on mental freedom, laid it out plainly. It's not events that disturb people, but their judgments about events. Between stimulus and response, there's a sliver of space, often just milliseconds, where you choose whether to buy into a thought or question its validity. Modern neuroscience confirms this. The amygdala fires first, triggering fight or flight, but the prefrontal cortex can intervene with reason if you train it to. Think of it like a social media fact-checker. A sensational headline pops up, "You're terrible at your job," and instead of instantly sharing it, spiraling into despair, you pause. Is this true? What's the evidence? Could there be other explanations? That's the discipline of assent in action, vetting mental impressions before granting them citizenship in your psyche. Seneca practiced this daily. When insulted in public, he'd imagine the words as objects he could catch or let pass. "Many things have pierced me," he wrote, "but none have stuck." Contrast this with how most of us operate. A friend reads our text but doesn't reply, and suddenly we've crafted an entire narrative about being disliked, all without a shred of proof. The Stoic shift interrupts this autopilot. Before accepting a thought as truth, you ask, does this serve me? Is it grounded in reality? Here's where it gets practical. Next time anxiety strikes, try the third-party test. Imagine your best friend describing the same situation. "My boss sent a short email. Would you tell them they're doomed?" Probably not. Or apply the courtroom rule. Only allow thoughts that could hold up under cross-examination. Your partner seems distant. Objection assumes facts, not in evidence. Could they just be tired? Marcus Aurelius left himself notes like, "Don't let the force of an impression carry you away." He wasn't suppressing emotions. He was preventing false interpretations from hijacking his peace. Modern therapists use similar techniques with anxious clients, teaching them to label thoughts as just thoughts, not commands or prophecies. The more you practice this pause, the quieter desperation becomes, because you're no longer mistaking mental weather for climate. The irony: most of the thoughts we assent to are like pop-up ads, unwanted, irrelevant, and often misleading. But when you start clicking "close" instead of "buy now," you reclaim something priceless, the space to choose your response. That's the secret Epictetus taught in a crumbling Roman classroom. Freedom isn't the absence of storms, it's the ability to stand in the rain without believing it's personal. Marcus Aurelius faced wars, plagues, and betrayals, yet his private writings reveal a man who remained unshaken at his core. How? He built what he called his inner citadel, a mental fortress no external storm could breach. Picture a medieval castle with high walls outside. Battles rage and seasons change, but inside, the library stays dry, the fire burns steady, and the inhabitants move with purpose. That's the Stoic's mind. Chaos may swirl around it, but within lies a space of unassailable calm. This isn't about denial or numbness. A citadel isn't empty, it's stocked with provisions of wisdom, its walls manned by disciplined perception. When barbarians massed at Rome's gates, Marcus didn't pretend they weren't there. He fortified his inner gates so their noise couldn't dictate his thoughts. Modern psychology echoes this with the concept of psychological detachment, the ability to mentally step back from stressors without disengaging from responsibility. Think of a surgeon in a crisis. Her hands move with precision, not because she ignores the urgency, but because she's trained to operate from a place of focused stillness. The practice begins with identifying what belongs inside your citadel and what stays at the gates. Your values, welcome them in, your commitment to kindness. Give it a throne room, but others' opinions, leave them outside where they can't trample your peace. Financial setbacks or health scares may scale the walls, but they don't get to rearrange the furniture. When Marcus wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events," he was mapping the blueprints to this inner stronghold. Consider the contrast with how most people live. Their mental real estate has no boundaries. A rude comment strolls in and burns down the confidence they spent years building. Bad news kicks open the door and sprawls across every mental couch. The Stoic alternative: install a drawbridge. You decide what crosses it. Epictetus, though born into slavery, modeled this perfectly. His master once twisted his leg as punishment, and Epictetus calmly remarked, "You'll break it." When the bone snapped, he added, "I told you so." The man owned his body, but Epictetus' citadel, his will, his character, remained sovereign territory. Building your citadel starts with small, daily architecture. Each time you pause before reacting to provocation, you add a stone to the wall. Every moment you choose principle over impulse, you reinforce the foundation. The walls aren't made of ignorance to suffering, but of the disciplined recognition that while pain is inevitable, devastation is optional. A musician heckled during a performance can crumble, or can let the noise fade against the walls of her craft's unshakable value. Marcus' most radical insight: the citadel's strength grows precisely because it's tested. Like immune systems exposed to germs, our resilience muscles develop through resistance. That's why he wrote, "The obstacle becomes the way, not in spite of hardships, but because of them." Your inner fortress isn't weakened by life's sieges, it's defined by them. The parent who stays patient through a child's tantrum isn't ignoring the chaos they're proving the citadel can hold. Try this visualization tonight. Close your eyes and picture your mind as a physical space. What's at its heart, your core truths, guard them well. What's clamoring at the gates, decide consciously whether to let it in. With practice, you'll find what Marcus knew. External events can strip you of possessions, health, even freedom. But they cannot touch your inner citadel unless you lower the drawbridge yourself. And that's where true power lies, not in controlling the world, but in fortifying the one place where you're always sovereign. Ancient sailors knew better than to set rigid courses. They'd chart their path with the caveat, weather permitting, understanding that winds and tides held final authority. The Stoics adopted this wisdom for life itself, with their reserve clause always adding, fate permitting, to even their most cherished plans. Seneca captured it perfectly. "I will sail across the sea unless the sea refuses me." On the surface, this sounds like hedging bets, but dig deeper and you uncover one of Stoicism's most liberating practices: the art of holding intentions lightly while gripping effort tightly. Consider how differently two entrepreneurs might face a failed product launch. The first, who staked their entire identity on success, crumbles into self-loathing. The second, who worked passionately but with the reserve clause whispering, "If nothing prevents it," recalibrates quickly. "This wasn't the path, then I'll find another." The goal hasn't changed, the attachment to one specific outcome has. Modern psychologists call this detached engagement, the sweet spot between apathy and obsession where peak performance lives. The magic lies in the phrasing's precision. Fate permitting isn't passive resignation, "Why bother trying?" It's active humility. I'll give my all while accepting that some forces aren't mine to command. When Marcus Aurelius planned military campaigns, he prepared meticulously but wrote, "The cucumber is bitter, then throw it out. There are brambles in the path." Then go around, not as defeat but as adaptability in action. The reserve clause transforms disappointment into course correction, not because you care less, but because you've left room for reality's unpredictability. Try this reframe today. Next time you set a goal, whisper the reserve clause as you write it down. "I'll finish this project by Friday unless urgent priorities arise." "I'll run my best marathon yet, barring injury or illness." Feel how it loosens desperation's grip while sharpening focus on what you can control. Like a tree that bends in strong winds but doesn't break, the reserve clause lets you stay rooted in purpose while flexible in form. History's most resilient figures embodied this balance. Thomas Edison's lab burned down hours after he uninsured it to fund another experiment. His response: "All our mistakes are now ashes. We can start anew." He didn't mourn the unchangeable. He honored the effort while accepting fate's intervention. Contrast this with how we often torture ourselves. "This must happen." We insist, as if demanding reality comply makes it more likely. The Stoic knows better. Determination fuels the journey, but the reserve clause makes space for life's detours. Here's where modern goal-setting culture gets it backwards. Vision boards and manifestation gurus preach rigid attachment to specific outcomes: the exact house, the precise salary, the dream partner with checklist traits. The reserve clause offers a healthier alternative. Pour energy into becoming the person worthy of those things, then release how or when they arrive. Want love? Focus not on finding the one, but on cultivating warmth and patience, qualities no failed date can take. Crave career success. Master your craft so thoroughly that one company's rejection becomes their loss, not your identity. The practice reaches its zenith when applied to life's most painful twists. Parents who whispered, fate permitting, as they kissed their children good night, could face tragedy with sorrow but not shattering, because they'd always known at some level that every moment was borrowed. This isn't morbid, it's the deepest form of presence. The reserve clause doesn't dilute joy. It strips away the illusion that joy depends on permanence. Epictetus, who knew cruelty firsthand as a slave, taught that freedom begins when we distinguish between our own and not our own. The reserve clause is that distinction in action, a daily reminder that while you own your efforts, results belong to the universe. Try it now with your next breath. Inhale ambition, exhale attachment. That's the paradox the Stoics mastered. By preparing for plans to fail, you become unbreakable when they do. There's a peculiar kind of strength that comes from staring directly at what scares you, not with dread, but with clear-eyed preparation. This is premeditatio malorum, the Stoic practice of mentally rehearsing future hardships to strip them of their power to shock. Picture a firefighter drilling for emergencies, the smoke, the chaos, the weight of gear, so when the real alarm sounds, their movements flow from training, not panic. That's the essence of this shift. By voluntarily walking through worst-case scenarios in your mind, you transform fear of the unknown into confident readiness. Ancient Stoics treated this like mental vaccination. Seneca would deliberately imagine losing his wealth, his status, even his loved ones. Far from morbid obsession, this was strategic inoculation, exposing himself to small doses of adversity to build immunity against life's inevitable blows. Modern psychology validates this approach. Studies on stress exposure training show that people who mentally simulate high-pressure situations, from public speaking to combat, perform better under actual stress. Their secret: the brain can't reliably distinguish between vivid imagination and lived experience. When you've already survived a catastrophe in your mind, the real thing feels like a rerun, not a horror premiere. Here's how to practice it without spiraling into anxiety. First, pick one specific fear, say a looming layoff. Now, mentally walk through it step by step. What's the first thing you'd do? Update your resume, perhaps. Who would you call? How might this open doors you hadn't considered? The key is detail. Imagine the textures, the emotions, even the mundane logistics. Like a chess player visualizing moves ahead, you're not predicting doom, you're rehearsing resilience. History's great strategists used this technique instinctively. Dwight Eisenhower planned military operations by starting with the phrase, "What if the enemy does this?" before outlining countermoves. J.K. Rowling famously wrote Harry Potter's final chapter years in advance, anchoring her creative process in certainty despite uncertain times. Both understood what the Stoics knew. Confidence isn't the absence of fear, it's the certainty that you've already faced the monster and mapped the exits. The magic lies in the distinction between premeditation and worry. Worry is cycling through vague what-ifs with no resolution. Premeditation is systematic problem-solving. Imagine the difference between obsessing over a possible car accident versus actually checking your brakes, buckling your seatbelt, and mentally noting escape routes on the highway. One drains you, the other fortifies. Try this tonight. Take 5 minutes to vividly imagine handling a challenge you're avoiding. Feel the discomfort, then script your response. You'll discover what Seneca found, that most feared events are like shadows in a child's bedroom, terrifying until you turn on the light and see them for what they are. That's the alchemy of premeditation. It doesn't prevent storms, but it ensures you're the one holding the umbrella. Between the moment something happens and how you react lies a sliver of space, often so thin it feels invisible. But what if you could stretch that space like taffy, transforming a hair trigger reaction into a thoughtful response? That's the essence of the Stoic pause, a practice so deceptively simple that most people underestimate its power until they wield it. Picture a martial artist who doesn't flinch when an opponent feints instead. They observe the movement, calculate trajectories, then choose the perfect counter. That split-second delay is where mastery lies, not just in combat, but in every interaction life throws at you. The science behind this is fascinating. Neuroscientists have identified what they call the amygdala hijack, when a perceived threat triggers a flood of stress hormones before your rational brain can intervene. It's why you shoot off that angry text or snap at a loved one, only to regret it moments later. The Stoics anticipated this 2 millennia ago. Epictetus taught that between any event and our reaction, there's a gap where freedom resides. The key: train yourself to notice and expand that gap. Consider how differently two people handle the same provocation. One gets cut off in traffic and immediately leans on the horn, face flushing, shouting insults no one hears. The other takes a deliberate breath, recognizes the other driver's action as irrelevant to their peace, and simply adjusts their speed. Both experienced the same stimulus. The difference was in the pause. Marcus Aurelius left himself notes like, "Take no action unwillingly," a reminder that every response should be a conscious choice, not a reflex. Practical application starts with body awareness. Next time you feel that jolt of anger or panic, heart pounding, shoulders tightening, that's your signal to activate the pause. Try this physical anchor. Press your tongue to the roof of your mouth. It sounds trivial, but this tiny movement disrupts the stress response loop, buying you precious seconds. Or adopt Seneca's method. When insulted, he'd imagine standing at the edge of a cliff, letting the words fly past him into the abyss before deciding if any deserved engagement. The magic unfolds when you realize most events don't demand immediate reactions. An upsetting email can wait 20 minutes while you take a walk. A child's tantrum doesn't require instant punishment. Sometimes silence is the most powerful response. Even in emergencies, professionals train to pause. Firefighters consciously assess before rushing in. Surgeons count to stabilize their hands. The Stoic pause isn't about hesitating out of fear. It's about creating space for wisdom to emerge. Modern life conspires against this practice. Notifications demand instant replies. Social media rewards knee-jerk hot takes, but the ancient Stoics knew better. When a messenger arrived with urgent news, Cato the Younger would make him wait while he finished reading his book, not to be rude, but to demonstrate that nothing external should yank your attention like a dog on a leash. This discipline compounds over time. What begins as a 2-second delay before responding to a snarky comment grows into the ability to sleep on major decisions or wait months for a strategy to bear fruit. Try this exercise today. Pick one routine interaction: answering a call, opening a work message, reacting to household noise, and insert a 3-breath pause. Notice how often the urgent wasn't urgent at all. Like a photographer waiting for the perfect light, you'll find that most moments improve when you stop forcing them. The pause doesn't prevent action, it prevents unnecessary suffering. As Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his wartime journal, our actions may be impeded, but there can be no impeding our choices. Those choices live in the pause, and that's where desperation goes to die. When desperation clouds your judgment and every option feels like a dead end, there's a simple but profound question that can cut through the fog. What would Socrates do? Or Zeno, or Epictetus, or any of the Stoic sages who faced far worse with unshakable clarity? This isn't about mythical perfection, it's about borrowing perspective from those who have already walked through fire and emerged wiser. Think of it like a mental time machine. You're stuck in a modern dilemma, a layoff, a betrayal, a crushing setback, and suddenly you're not alone in the room. You've got 20 centuries of Stoic wisdom whispering over your shoulder, offering a vantage point higher than your own. History's greatest minds used this trick. Benjamin Franklin kept a list of virtues he admired in others, then emulated them like a tailor stitching together his ideal coat. James Stockdale, the Vietnam POW, survived 7 years of torture by channeling Epictetus' teachings on what we can and cannot control. Even Marcus Aurelius, with the weight of an empire on his shoulders, would write letters to himself as if advising a younger, more impulsive version of himself. The power here isn't in idol worship, it's in recognizing that your current crisis isn't unique. Someone, somewhere, has already faced it and left you a map. Here's how to activate this shift. First, build your personal Stoic council. Pick 3 historical figures, maybe Seneca for his grace under pressure, Zeno for his calm in adversity, or even a modern exemplar like Nelson Mandela, who studied Stoicism during his imprisonment. When you're spiraling, pause and imagine these figures observing your situation. How would Seneca react to your co-worker's petty insult? Would Epictetus waste energy panicking over a delayed flight, or would he open a book and use the unexpected time? You're not copying them, you're letting their hard-won wisdom reveal options your desperation has blinded you to. The magic lies in the specificity. Don't just ask, what would a wise person do? That's too vague. Picture Socrates in your exact shoes. He's just been ghosted by a date, or his startup failed, or his health report came back concerning. How would he dissect the problem? What questions would he ask to uncover hidden assumptions? Socrates' famous method, relentless questioning, is tailor-made for desperation's fog. Is this truly a catastrophe, or does it just feel like one? What's the worst that could happen, and is it as bad as I'm imagining? Suddenly, you're not reacting, you're interrogating the situation like a philosopher. Modern psychology backs this with cognitive distancing, stepping outside yourself to gain objectivity. Studies show that people who give themselves advice in the third person, what should Alex do here? Make wiser decisions than those mired in first-person panic. The Stoic version goes deeper. You're not just distancing yourself, you're borrowing the minds of history's most resilient thinkers. Imagine Zeno, who lost everything in a shipwreck and responded by founding Stoicism on the rubble. Your bad day suddenly looks like fertile ground, not quicksand. Practical application: keep a Stoic role model card in your wallet or phone. On it, list how your chosen figures handled crises. When desperation strikes, pull it out and ask, how would they refuse to be defined by this? Maybe it's Epictetus chuckling at insults, or Marcus Aurelius writing, "The obstacle is the way," while battling Germanic tribes. Their examples aren't just inspirational, they're blueprints for recalibration. The ultimate insight: you don't need these sages' lives, just their lenses. A single question, what would Seneca see here that I'm missing, can reveal hidden exits from desperation's maze. Because sometimes the wisest thing you can do is admit your own vision is clouded and borrow someone else's clarity until the storm passes. Stephen Covey's famous circle of influence model and ancient Stoic teachings might seem like distant cousins at first glance, both advising us to focus energy where we have control, but dig deeper, and you'll find a fascinating divergence in philosophy that changes everything. Covey, the modern productivity guru, taught that proactive people focus on their circle of influence, expanding it over time by tackling solvable problems. The Stoics, however, would argue there's a critical flaw in that approach. The very act of trying to expand control can become its own form of desperation. Picture a salesperson obsessed with influencing clients to buy. Covey's model might encourage refining pitches or expanding networks' actions within their sphere. But Epictetus would challenge the premise itself. Is closing the sale truly within your control, or is your only real dominion over your effort and ethics? The difference is subtle but seismic. Covey's circles are dynamic. You push boundaries outward through effort. The Stoic version is static, with a bright, unyielding line between what's yours to command and what isn't. One encourages striving to control more, the other teaches peace in accepting what can't be controlled. This isn't just semantics, it reshapes daily decisions. Imagine a manager using Covey's approach to influence a resistant employee through persuasion tactics. A Stoic would ask, is this person's willingness to change truly yours to govern? Or are you exhausting yourself against an immovable wall? The Stoic alternative: pour energy into clear communication and leading by example, then release attachment to the outcome. Modern psychology backs this. Studies show that over-focusing on uncontrollable outcomes increases stress, while focusing on process improves performance. The irony: both models converge in unexpected ways. Covey's circle of concern mirrors the Stoic concept of externals, things we care about but can't control, like markets or others' opinions. Where they split is in the response. Covey urges expanding influence. Stoicism advises withdrawing concern. The modern hybrid: use Covey's energy for action within the Stoic circle of control, then apply Stoic detachment where influence ends. Practical application: draw both circles. Inside the Stoic ring, write my actions, my values, my responses. In Covey's larger ring, note collaborations, opportunities, relationships. Now strategize like Covey, but when hitting resistance, pivot to Stoic acceptance. A project floundering despite your effort, Covey says problem solve. Stoicism says redirect effort or redefine success. The wisest path: let Covey guide your hands, but let Stoicism guard your peace. History's most effective leaders blended these approaches. Abraham Lincoln fought passionately to preserve the Union. Covey's influence, yet wrote, "I do the very best I know how, and I mean to keep doing so until the end. If the end brings me out all right, what is said against me won't amount to anything." Pure Stoicism. That's the sweet spot: acting boldly where you can, then releasing the rest like a leaf in a river. The ultimate test: when you're tempted to make things happen, pause, ask, am I straining against reality's tide or moving with purposeful strokes within my lane? Desperation dies when you stop conflating influence with control, when you realize that true power isn't in expanding your reach, but in deepening your mastery over the only thing ever truly yours, your next choice. Imagine walking through a crowded marketplace where vendors shout about their wares: sparkling trinkets, flashy gadgets, the latest fleeting trends. Now picture yourself able to stroll past them all, undisturbed, because you know precisely what holds real value. That's the essence of the Stoic shift, called contempt for frivolous things, not hatred or disdain, but a deliberate indifference to what doesn't serve your growth or peace. The ancient Stoics didn't scorn luxuries because they were Puritans. They dismissed them because they recognized how easily shiny distractions become prisons of misplaced desire. Seneca put it bluntly, "It is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the one who craves more." This shift isn't about minimalism or deprivation. It's about recalibrating your attention to create space for what endures. Think of it like mental decluttering. When you stop agonizing over designer labels or social media likes, you free up energy for relationships, creativity, and self-mastery. Marcus Aurelius, ruling the wealthiest empire on earth, would remind himself, "The cucumber is bitter, then throw it out. You don't need to rant about it." That's the core insight. Complaining about trivialities drains more life than the things themselves ever could. Consider the modern obsession with keeping up. The neighbor buys a new car, and suddenly your reliable sedan feels inadequate. A coworker lands a superficial promotion, and you question your meaningful but quieter path. The Stoics called this mimetic desire, wanting things not because we value them, but because others do. Epictetus, who owned nothing but a wooden cup until he saw a child drink from cupped hands and threw even that away, taught that freedom begins when we stop conflating prestige with worth. Practical application starts with a simple filter. When faced with any concern, ask, "Will this matter in 5 years on my deathbed?" The answer doesn't just reveal what's frivolous, it highlights what's sacred. A scratched phone screen feels urgent until you contrast it with your child's laughter or a friend in need. The Stoics weren't immune to vanity. Seneca admitted wearing fine robes early in life, but they practiced voluntary discomfort to expose these traps. Sleeping on the floor occasionally, wearing plain clothes, or fasting reminded them that happiness isn't housed in external things. History's wisest figures embodied this. Diogenes lived in a barrel to prove how little a person truly needs, shocking Alexander the Great, who reportedly said, "If I weren't Alexander, I'd want to be Diogenes." Gandhi owned fewer than 10 possessions at his death. Even modern innovators like Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg adopted uniforms, not from lack of style, but to conserve decision-making energy for what truly mattered to them. The magic lies in what floods into the space left by discarded frivolities. When you stop fretting over airline legroom, you notice the miracle of human flight. When you quit comparing salaries, you rediscover the joy of craft. Like clearing weeds from a garden, contempt for superficial concerns lets wisdom and gratitude take root. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." That's the ultimate litmus test. If your last day came, would you regret not buying a trendier couch or not savoring more sunsets? Try this today. Pick one urgent concern, a colleague's snub, a delayed package, and consciously downgrade its importance. Then redirect that mental bandwidth towards something timeless. A handwritten note to a loved one, 10 minutes of deep work on a meaningful project. You'll discover what Seneca meant when he said true wealth is wanting little, not because you have less, but because you've identified what actually fills you. The quieter your mind becomes about petty things, the more clearly you'll hear the whispers of what matters. There's a cruel irony in how our attempts to control everything often leave us feeling more powerless than ever. The tighter we grip the steering wheel of life, the more it slips through our fingers. And that gap between expectation and reality is where desperation thrives. Here's the Stoic counterintuitive truth. Real mastery begins when you stop trying to control the uncontrollable and focus instead on commanding your own reactions. Picture a trapeze artist who knows she can't control the swing of the bar or the timing of her partner's release. Her power lies in perfecting her movements to meet whatever circumstances arise. That's the paradox of control the Stoics unveiled. By surrendering what was never yours to command, you gain unshakable sovereignty over the only thing that truly matters, your inner world. Consider how we typically approach stressful situations. A job interview becomes an exercise in mental torture as we obsess over every possible question, the interviewer's mood, even the traffic that might make us late. We exhaust ourselves trying to manipulate variables that ultimately aren't ours to manage. Now contrast this with the Stoic approach, preparing thoroughly for questions within your expertise, then releasing attachment to the outcome. The first method leaves you frayed and desperate. The second cultivates calm confidence regardless of results. Epictetus, who had absolutely no control over being enslaved as a child, demonstrated this perfectly when he said, "I must die, but must I die groaning too?" His tormentors could chain his body, but only he decided whether his spirit would resist. Modern psychology confirms this ancient wisdom. Studies on the illusion of control show that people experience significantly less stress when they distinguish between influence and absolute control. Air traffic controllers who have enormous responsibility but zero control over weather or mechanical failures develop this skill instinctively, their secret. Focus obsessively on what's in their domain: communication, protocol, attention, and acknowledge the rest as factors to adapt to, not command. This isn't passive resignation, it's strategic energy allocation. The magic happens when you apply this to daily frustrations. Traffic jams don't disappear when you white-knuckle the wheel, but your suffering does when you accept the delay and use it to listen to an audiobook. Your teenager's mood swings aren't yours to fix, but your compassionate detachment creates space for them to work through emotions. Even physical pain responds to this principle. Studies on chronic pain patients show those who stop fighting their discomfort and instead focus on managing their response experience significant relief. The pain doesn't vanish, but its tyranny over their lives does. Marcus Aurelius demonstrated this daily while ruling Rome. Plagues, rebellions, and betrayals swirled around him, none within his complete control. Yet his private journals reveal a man who found profound freedom in this constraint. You have power over your mind, not outside events, he reminded himself, not as consolation but as emancipation. Modern leaders echo this. When Starbucks lost millions during the 2008 financial crisis, Howard Schultz didn't waste energy raging against markets. He controlled what he could, retraining baristas, improving coffee quality, and doubling down on customer experience. The company emerged stronger not despite the crisis, but because they redirected effort to their true sphere of influence. Here's how to activate this shift. First, conduct a control audit. Divide a page into 2 columns, mine to command and not mine. Be ruthlessly honest. Your effort belongs in the first column, others' opinions go in the second. Your morning routine is yours, the weather isn't. Then practice the Stoic double vision technique. As events unfold, train yourself to simultaneously see what's happening and assess whether it's within your control. That argument with your partner, their tone isn't yours to dictate, but your response is. The stock market's plunge, your investments are your concern, the Dow's daily dance isn't. The ultimate freedom comes when you realize that external events are like the weather. You can prepare for them, adapt to them, even appreciate them, but commanding them is a fool's errand. Like a sailor who doesn't curse the wind but adjusts the sails, you'll find that life's turbulence becomes manageable when you stop trying to be the storm and start becoming the captain. That's the paradox at the heart of Stoicism. By releasing your grip on the world, you finally take hold of yourself. Ancient Stoics weren't the stone-faced ascetics pop culture often portrays. They were masters of wielding humor as a weapon against life's absurdities. Picture Seneca, exiled to Corsica for political intrigue, writing letters that joked about the island's charming lack of luxury. No need for doormen here, the scorpions already discourage visitors. Or imagine Epictetus, the formerly enslaved philosopher, quipping to a student complaining about life's unfairness. You think this is bad, wait until you see what comes next. This wasn't mere comic relief, it was calculated emotional alchemy, transforming bitterness into perspective with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. The genius of Stoic humor lies in its timing, not as denial of hardship, but as defiance against letting hardship dictate one's spirit. When the Roman Emperor Vespasian levied a controversial toilet tax, his critics shoved coins under his nose saying, "This doesn't stink." His Stoic trained response, sniffing the coins and deadpanning, "And yet they come from urine." The crowd erupted in laughter, the tension dissolved, and the tax remained, but the moment revealed a profound truth. Levity can disarm hostility without surrendering principle. Modern psychology confirms this. Studies show that patients who use gallows humor in ICU units report 30% lower stress levels, while negotiators who deploy strategic wit achieve 22% better outcomes. Consider James Stockdale, the naval pilot turned POW who survived 7 years of Vietnamese torture. His memoir recounts how he and fellow prisoners communicated through coughs and taps to create a parody of camp regulations, mockingly promoting guards to absurd titles like Minister of Untied Shoelaces. This wasn't escapism, it was psychological resistance. By laughing at their captors' pettiness, they reclaimed agency over their emotional space. Stockdale credited this practice, learned from Epictetus' teachings, as vital to his survival. Humor became his covert armor, thin enough to slip past the jailer's notice, strong enough to shield his sanity. The Stoic distinction between comedy and mockery matters deeply. Marcus Aurelius warned against cruel humor that punches down, but embraced wit that punctures pretension, including one's own. When a senator criticized his frugal meals, Marcus didn't rage. He invited the man to dinner and served identical modest portions, grinning, "Now you see why I don't need your culinary advice." The lesson: laughter aimed upward at power or inward at oneself liberates. Laughter aimed downward at the vulnerable corrodes character. Practical application starts with what the ancients called laughing in advance, preempting misfortune's sting by joking about its possibility. Before important presentations, Stoic-minded executives now practice premortem humor, imagining and laughing at worst-case scenarios. What if the projector fails and I have to interpretive dance my quarterly report? This mental rehearsal does two things. It reduces the terror of failure and often reveals that the disaster would make a great story later. Therapists use a similar approach with anxiety patients. Describe your fear as a B-movie title, because humor creates cognitive distance from distress. The finest Stoic jokes often pair brutal honesty with absurdity. When Zeno's ship sank with all his goods, he dryly informed Athens that fortune had recommended traveling light. Centuries later, Churchill channeled this spirit during the Blitz, telling panicked civilians, "We're short of everything except enemies, and we've got plenty of those." This isn't toxic positivity, it's acknowledging darkness while refusing to be defined by it. Like a night watchman whistling through a graveyard, the courage lies in admitting the eerie while asserting one's right to melody. Try this today. When a minor annoyance strikes, a spilled coffee, a missed train, invent an intentionally exaggerated headline about it. Local adult outsmarted by inanimate objects again. You'll discover what the Stoics knew. Desperation shrinks when absurdity expands. The coffee stain isn't tragic, it's material for a future dinner story. The train delay isn't sabotage, it's an unplanned mindfulness exercise. As Seneca wrote while exiled, sometimes just to endure is to laugh. Not because life isn't painful, but because choosing mirth in the teeth of pain is the ultimate victory. There's a moment in every storm where the world seems to pause. A single breath between thunderclaps, a patch of sky untouched by swirling clouds. That's where Stoicism takes root, not in the absence of chaos, but in the stillness beneath it. Picture a hurricane's eye, how everything at its center remains calm while winds scream just miles away. That's the paradox of the Stoic mind. Marcus Aurelius would conduct empires, shaking war councils by day, then write in his journal by candlelight. Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. He wasn't escaping reality, he was proving that turmoil's volume depends entirely on where you place your attention. This shift isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending storms don't exist. It's about discovering an anchor so deep that external waves can't capsize you. Navy SEAL train for this under live gunfire. Their instructors teach combat breathing, a 4-count inhale and exhale that overrides panic's grip. The Stoics practiced something eerily similar 2,000 years earlier. Epictetus described it as sinking into the self, a deliberate descent past surface reactions to where your true power waits. Think of it like diving into the ocean's depths. No matter how violent the surface waves, 20 feet down the water remain still. The technique unfolds in layers. Start with the body. When tension strikes, notice where it lives. A clenched jaw, hunched shoulders, shallow breaths. Then, like a plumber turning off valves, systematically release each tension point. The Stoics called this prosouch, attention turned inward. Modern biofeedback studies reveal why it works. Just 90 seconds of focused breathing can drop cortisol levels by 20%. But the real magic happens in the mind. As your body stills, begin narrating the chaos around you as if you're a scientist observing a phenomenon. My heart is racing. My boss is shouting, the deadline looms. This creates psychological distance. You're not the storm, you're the lighthouse watching it pass. History's greatest crisis responders mastered this. Winston Churchill would take baths during the Blitz's worst bombings, humming opera as explosions rattled the pipes. Asked how he stayed composed, he quipped, "I'm saving my panic for when it's useful." That's Stoic stillness in action, recognizing that most emergencies aren't improved by flailing, but by measured response. Even in extreme cases, like Viktor Frankl observing Nazi guards' behavior in Auschwitz to maintain his sanity, the principle holds. Detachment isn't indifference, it's the clarity to act wisely when others react blindly. Practical application begins with micro moments. Next time your phone pings with bad news, don't reach for it immediately. Let it sit while you take 3 deliberate breaths in through the nose, out through pursed lips. That tiny space disrupts the panic cycle. Or try the Stoic gaze technique. Fix your eyes on a stationary object, a tree, a coffee mug, and mentally catalog its details, color, texture, weight, until your thoughts slow to match its solidity. Like Marcus watching the flames of his campfire during battle, you're training perception to ground itself in what's present, not what's feared. The ultimate test comes when chaos is loudest. A parent staying calm during a child's meltdown isn't ignoring the situation, they're creating emotional space for both to regain footing. A CEO addressing a PR disaster with steady tone isn't faking composure, they've touched the stillness where solutions form. Even in grief, this practice shines. Seneca described watching his own sobs as if observing a river's current, honoring the emotion without drowning in it. The secret stillness isn't found, it's remembered. Like a dancer who knows the routine so deeply they can perform amid distractions, the Stoic mind returns to breathe, to presence, to the unshakable truth that storms are always passing. What remains, what's always remained, is the quiet center where you decide whether to be uprooted or to bend like bamboo, resilient and rooted. That's the final shift, realizing the calm wasn't outside you all along. It was the part the storm could never touch. These 25 Stoic shifts aren't just abstract ideas. They're a survival kit for the soul, forged in the fires of ancient wisdom and tested across centuries of human struggle. Each one is like a mental lever. Pull the right one at the right moment, and desperation loses its grip. The dichotomy of control untangles the knots of what you can't change. Amor Fati transforms setbacks into stepping stones. The view from above shrinks problems to their true size. Together, they form an unbreakable framework for facing life's chaos with clarity rather than panic. But here's the secret the Stoics knew. Philosophy isn't a spectator sport. You don't build resilience by memorizing quotes. You forge it through daily repetition, like a blacksmith tempering steel. Start small. Pick just 1 or 2 of these shifts to practice this week, maybe the Stoic pause before reacting to triggers, or the nightly journal audit Seneca swore by. Stack them onto existing habits, pair premeditatio malorum with your morning coffee, or use Memento Mori as your phone's lock screen reminder. These aren't grand gestures, they're subtle recalibrations that compound over time. Imagine Epictetus, the once crippled slave, who turned his suffering into strength not through dramatic gestures, but by asking himself daily, "What's mine to govern?" That's the essence of Stoic living, not perfection, but persistent realignment toward what matters. The true power of these tools reveals itself in life's crucible moments. When you're blindsided by bad news, the reserve clause whispers, fate permitting. When envy creeps in, contempt for frivolous things strips shiny distractions of their false allure. And when the weight of the world feels unbearable, the inner citadel stands ready, an inviolable space where no external force can dictate your peace. This is how ordinary people become unshakable, not by avoiding storms, but by remembering they've already packed the mental umbrella. So here's your challenge. Don't let this just be another video you watch and forget. The Stoics didn't pass down these techniques for admiration. They left them as working blueprints for building a life of purpose. Choose one shift today, just one, and put it into action before sunset. Test it like a scientist, observe the results, then refine. That's how philosophy moves from parchment to practice, from theory to transformation. The road ahead won't always be smooth, but now you're equipped with something far more valuable than luck or wishful thinking, a toolkit forged by history's toughest minds. Carry it well. The world needs more unbreakable souls.